Hello everyone. Gosh, after a couple of hours of fantastic, absorbing, immersive work from these incredible sound artists, now for something completely different. As Emily said, I've been writing music for, gosh, a long, long time. And I was thinking about what I would come and show you a couple of examples. I want to show you a couple of case studies of my most recent projects that I've been working on this year, which are very, very different to what I normally do and create. And it's a funny thing because thinking about what I was going to say today, these two projects that I worked on recently, in a kind of a way, encapsulate the last 20 years of what I've been doing for a living, writing music and working in sound and so on, and music engineering. So it's quite apt, I think, coming here today and talking about that. I think the title of today, The Sound of Story, is wonderful because it's how I see myself. I see myself as a storyteller through music. And I love collaborating with people, working as part of a team. If I were left to my own devices and told to sit and write a piece of music with no aim or objective, I wouldn't know where to begin and I wouldn't know when to stop writing. So working to a deadline and working under pressure is an amazing thing to sort of kick you up the bottom and make you be creative and productive and push you to your creative limits as well. And these two projects that I worked on this year did that for me. So, okay, so looking at the process the different processes that I use to approach my scores, I've found there have been three main ways. Writing music for trailers or TV commercials or documentaries or drama. I've found they all have their slightly different quirks and the way you approach writing them. But I've found there are three main ways. One is I love writing to picture. I'm very visually inspired. If you put an image in front of me or put two actors on a screen or in front of me, I'll know how to respond emotionally to it. And that's what I do. I respond emotionally in a very direct, immediate way to something. The second way I write is I write without any images at all. And I have to admit, I do struggle a little bit. It's something that I've worked very hard at to get better at, which is writing blind, where you are a description of something is thrown at you. A director or a film producer or an editor may describe a scene to you and say, right, I need a piece of music for XYZ. Can you come up with something that will reflect those emotions and moods? I just got a text, actually, about half an hour ago from a series I'm working on for the BBC Natural History Unit. And there's one episode where in the series where it's about the relationship between animals and tribes around the world. And this particular episode looks at crocodiles in Papua New Guinea and how the tribes that live by the water cohabit, if you like, with crocodiles. And I got a whole list of requests from the director saying, can we have a piece of music that shows, the stealth, the tribe sort of hunting the crocodile stealthily down the river? Can we have another piece of music that that works for something that's uplifting and joyful for the villagers dancing around a campfire? So on goes the thinking cap. I spend more of my time researching and actually doing nothing than I do writing music, because it's 90% cogitation and research and thinking about it, and then suddenly, before you know it, a deadline is being thrown at you and you're being thrown into it and think, oh my God, I have to write a piece of music by tomorrow. I better get on with it. But all that time spent thinking about the music, thinking about the story, and the role you're playing, and researching and fiddling about on the computer and going on YouTube and iTunes and so on, informs me and helps me a lot in throwing all that chaos and uncertainty into some kind of order. The third way I approach writing is actually a combination of the two, this hybrid combination where I love to be brought on very early on into a project, where I can think about things and do research and experiment with ideas, and then when the pressure's on, get stuck into writing music. So I write a lot of ideas beforehand, and then I'll have visuals thrown at me, and then I start writing to picture when I know what I'm doing. So the first project that I worked on this year is a strange hybrid of documentary and drama. It's called The Confessions of Thomas Quick, and it's a film that was released in the cinema in the UK earlier this summer. And it's about Sweden's most notorious serial killer. But all is not what it seems. There are lots of twists and turns in the story. And I got brought on. I found out about this project about 2.5 years ago. And I'd been talking to the director about it. We'd been talking about various approaches. And I had not written a single note of music. And then suddenly, about 5 weeks before the job had to be done, the director called up and said, "You're on. You've got the green light. You have to write 83 minutes of music in 4.5 weeks," which seems to be more and more the case these days with features and dramas, where you have to be very, very productive in a small amount of time. So I tend to work backwards from the schedule. So I worked out that I had to write something like 15 to 20 minutes of music per week. The director would come over for weekly viewings, and it was very much a collaboration. He'd give me feedback and I'd make any changes. I was very lucky in that actually I think I had 3 changes to make in the whole score, which was quite remarkable. It's not quite what I'm used to. But what the director had done is he had given me a picture lock version. I tend to work right before an edit and right through the editing process. But in this instance, he gave me a final picture lock, and he had laid on what is called temp music. Temp music is laid on by the editor and director when they're editing, and it helps them set the tone and the pace, and it helps them edit the film, gauge an emotional tone for a particular scene. And this film was plastered from wall to wall with temp music from various sources. Temp music has its pros and cons. It's great in setting the tone and helping the communication process between what can seem a very esoteric, abstract form of writing music to film, and directors and editors don't necessarily understand music, and why should they? That's not their expertise. So using temp music and finding out what works and doesn't work is very, very useful to help that communication between the director and composer. So I have a love-hate relationship with temp music. So this film was laid with temp music, and I said to the director after watching it for the first time, do you mind if I ignore the temp music totally? I can't. I don't think it's working. It was a very brave thing to say. I don't think the temp music is working. It's doing nothing for the images. Trust me. Let me have a bash at this. If you don't like what I do, then we can talk about it and take things further. This is the opening scene of the film, which sets the whole tone. The only brief I got from the director was that he wanted it to be very cinematic and to draw the viewer in a very slow, brooding, menacing, dark way. So this is the temp music that they had laid on.
The police found terrible texts that he had written on pads and papers in the 90s when he was in the hospital, where he said that he ate parts of little boys and he was aroused sexually by doing it.
We had our own Hannibal Lecter.
As more and more confessions came, I thought this is one of the greatest criminal cases in Swedish history.
He confessed to 39 murders.
He was big shot, big story, yes. All these murders, serial killer, one of our first, maybe our first real serial killer.
He changed his name, you know. Sture Bergvall, it's not a good name for a serial killer. But Thomas Quick, that means in English Thomas the Fast.
Okay. It's a very subtle piece of music. Not necessarily the right choice, I think. And music is very subjective, and everyone is entitled to their opinion, but they wanted something that would work better to picture, to bring out the character of Thomas Sture Bergvall. And this is the end result. This is the composed score.
The police found terrible texts that he had written on pads and papers in the 90s when he was in the hospital, where he said that he ate parts of little boys and he was aroused sexually by doing it.
We had our own Hannibal Lecter.
As more and more confessions came, I thought this is one of the greatest criminal cases in Swedish history.
He confessed to 39 murders.
He was big shot, big story, yes. All these murders, serial killer, one of our first, maybe our first real serial killer.
He changed his name, you know. Sture Bergvall, it's not a good name for a serial killer. But Thomas Quick, that means in English Thomas the Fast.
Jag gjorde mitt första erkännande 1992.
So, the process in terms of setting the tone for the whole score and the rest of the music, all 80 minutes of music in the film, it's a combination of several things. I like to find, you have to stand out from the crowd in terms of setting, creating a unique musical voice for a film. And in order to do that, one of my approaches is that I turn to world music. I find musicians who play unusual instruments, and I have a collection of very unusual sound sources and musical instruments. And I found this film is set in Scandinavia, and I found about 4 years ago, I found a musician. I went to a music festival, and this guy, Antti Palanen, who plays the Finnish accordion, but he plays it in a very unusual way. And I found that very inspiring. Here's a little excerpt. So I was immediately taken by the way he used the accordion in a very non-folky melodic way, sort of rhythmical textures. And I said, one day I'm going to find a place for that in a film score. And indeed, 4 years later I did. And he ended up playing for me on the score. And he's one of the elements in one of the cues. So he ended up providing a very unique quality, a unique touch that really enhanced and brought out Sture's personality. And the other thing I like to do is to combine my skills that I learned very, very early on in my career of sound editing and sound design and manipulating sound. So I brought in a lot of sound design elements, sort of electronic elements, and these world music elements. And so for me, if you go to my website, you'll be able to hear a lot more examples of the score and watch some clips. Sadly, we haven't got time today, but you can hear the culmination of the last 20 years of my composing career in some aspects of it. The other project that I worked on this year is very, very different from Thomas Quick. And that's why I wanted to talk about it. I was brought on to write a musical. It's a documentary musical, which makes it even more different. And it was commissioned by the BBC originally. And there is really no precedent because it's a strange hybrid of documentary combined with musicals. So if you think about a film musical with actors, songs, storytelling through songs, this film is obviously, music and songs, but you have real contributors, real people, not actors, telling their stories through song. And it's where the music leads the narrative and interweaves seamlessly with documentary interviews through the film. So I was brought on to write 8 4-minute songs. The film is about 7 or 8 children in a school in the slums of Dharavi in Mumbai. And we're exposed to films about the third world. We're oversaturated with news and gritty subjects on television and news and current affairs and documentaries. And the director wanted to use music and song as a more engaging and inviting and entertaining way of telling very tough, gritty, dark stories. All true, nothing fabricated, which is what I loved about this. So he chose 7 or 8 children who were not cast on their ability to sing and dance, but cast purely on the strength of their personalities and their stories. And they all had very different ranging backgrounds, but all living in the slums of Dharavi. And I wrote the songs in a very modular way so that it would be easy for the director and editor to hack the songs to pieces in the edit suite once they went into post. So I had about 3 days to write each song from start to finish. It was about 24, 25, just over 3-week period. Before I wrote the basics of the songs, I was given 4 or 5 lines of story about the background story of each child. And I had a few minutes of footage. They had been interviewing the children in Mumbai before I was brought onto the project. So I watched the videos of each child, got a feel for their speech patterns and the way they communicated so that I could immerse myself into their personalities and be true to them and tell their stories truthfully and with integrity as much as I could. And that was very important for me to do that. So I made the decision to write very Western-based music in 8 very different musical genres, ranging from urban hip-hop to feel-good, upbeat pop music to R&B ballads, and wrote the basics of the songs, sent the songs out to India so that the children could learn them. I got a vocal coach to teach them how to sing. Each child had about 4 hours to learn how to sing. And then the other thing I forgot to mention is that I wrote all the songs in English, but I had to write them in 3 or 4 different languages. I only speak English. So I didn't want a translator, I wanted a lyricist. So I worked with a Bollywood lyricist who took my English lyrics, and the songs had been written, the melodies had been formed, the phrasing and the rhyming was intact in English. But I worked with him, and I do speak a little bit of pidgin Hindi, and we managed to translate the lyrics into Urdu and Marathi and Hindi, the local languages that the children sang in, retaining the rhythm and the meter and the emotional integrity and the meaning of the lyrics, so that whatever language you sang in, it would work, which worked with the subtitles on the screen and with the singing of the children. The songs had to be catchy, memorable, light, accessible, and easy for the children to learn. But at the end of the day, the audience was an adult audience. They were not children's songs, so they were telling their own stories to camera. So let's have a look at a little small excerpt from the film. This is Raj and Mayuri, one of the characters, the brother and sister couple, who they have a very sad story. Their mother committed suicide a year ago. Their father remarried very quickly, soon after their mother's death. Their stepmother is an evil stepmother, sad to say. She beats them, but the one thing that they have is this brotherly, sisterly bond between them, and we had to focus on some kind of positivity, amongst the tragedy of their story. So, as you can see, it was a tough subject to write about, and this was the result.
माझी आई खूप चांगली होती. खूप लाड करायची. कामावर न घरी आले की हे करायची. कोण घरात नसलं तर बाहेर येऊन बघायची कोण आहे की नाही पोरं. आणि नसले की बाजूवाल्यांना विचारायची.
हम भाई बहन हम हैं साथ साथ हर दिन करे नई शुरुआत बीते जो लम्हे आगे ही हम जाएं जीतेंगे हम ही तो क्यों घबराए डरना नहीं मेरे भाई थामो हाथ मैं रहूंगी तुम्हारे साथ अकेले हम नहीं बस एक और दिन तुम्हें रहना हमारे साथ. मेरी माँ रहती तो बहुत खुश.
And then we obviously segue, hopefully seamlessly, into a documentary interview, and we cut to and fro between the song and the interviews several times. I'd like to end with a more upbeat character. Little Ifat is 12 years old. This is the only information that I was given about her. She's 12 years old, and she speaks 6 different languages. She wants to be an eye doctor when she grows up because she wants people to see the world, to see colour, and people to see the world, blind people to see the world through her eyes. She's very much into global warming and saving animals and the Arctic and global issues. And she's the brightest girl in school. So with that sort of tidbits of information, I wrote the song. And the way I approached writing each 4-minute song was to have a verse, chorus, middle 8, a very traditional pop structure. So on one level, the songs are very simple, and they had to be written in a very simple, structured way to be able to be edited afterwards, so that the director and editor could then go, right, okay, let's take a verse and a chorus and use that, edit around it, come out of it, and then go back into another musical section of the song. They would then give me back the rough cuts, and I would then rework the music. At the same time, I was working on the production. When we came back to England for the editing process, I'd be working on the production while they were editing, so that I would bring in Indian musicians to play little ethnic elements on top. And we recorded a 28-piece string section in Bulgaria. I went to Eastern Europe to record some real strings to improve and enhance the production values of the music. So it was this project was sort of worked on right across in sort of several countries, utilizing the talents of many great world musicians, which goes back to my beginnings of working with Peter Gabriel and world music, and that really informed me and helped me put this together. So this is Little Ifat's upbeat, jolly song.
The first category is English.
I always do well in my exams.
The question is, there are 5 stages of writing, I, D, E, E, P. Can you tell me what each letter of ID means?
I get marks like A1.
All writing. I thought R नहीं है. Edit, draft, enhance,
100% in every subject. I'm insightful. I can speak 6 languages. I quickly catch up everything. The spoken word is the powerful tool. We have freedom of speech, so I'm going to teach. So I'll reach you with a heart that's pure. We'll all be better when we've been schooled. Come and see the world through my eyes. Bonjour, ça va bien? Very jolly, very good. I'll be a little jolly jalebi. Put your hands in the air if you're feeling jolly good. We're gonna make the world a better place. Bonjour, ça va bien? Very jolly, very good. I'll be a little jolly jalebi. Put your hands in the air if you're feeling jolly good. We're gonna make Dharavi a better place. I live in Dharavi in a flat. Because I like neat and tidy places. My family live in a clean place and I keep my house also clean.
इसमें ऐड कर देंगे 7 and 4.
So, I think we're about there, really. I mean, that's, that project is not quite finished. We've just finished apologise for the sound mix. That's a rough sound mix at the moment because it's we've just finished editing the feature-length version. But we'll see what happens when it goes on the film festival circuit next year. So thank you very much.
Hi, did you do any pitch correcting on the kids? Like any melodyne or anything, or did you just let
Very
it
good question.
au naturel?
They were not cast on their ability to sing and dance, so when the kids were thrown at me, I freaked out when I heard them. We'd be in the studio in India. We literally had 4 hours per child to record the vocals, and we would start off in the correct key, and we had I would supply guide mixes with guide vocals, so I sang the guide vocals, and they would be about 6 or 7 semitones out, and we'd have to we'd record each line, sort of half a line or a phrase or 3 words at a time, but we'd play each line about 30-40 times on loop, so that the child, so that Ifat or Mary or whatever would sing repeatedly again and again like parrot fashion, and eventually they'd come into tune, reasonably into tune and reasonably into time. And then we spent, we got the best that we could in the studio, and then we spent 2.5 weeks tuning it. Literally just spending, in Melodyne, tuning the vocals. But it was a very tough decision because we had 3 different. I created 3 different tuned vocals versions for each song. Sort of literally the best of the untuned, 50% tuned, and then sounding like Madonna, and very tuned. And the director actually wanted to go back to the original untuned vocals. So what you heard there on Ifat is totally untuned. And that really set my alarm bells ringing when he said, okay, this is a non-musical director who wants to go to untuned vocals. And when I saw it in context with the film, it was, you forgive the kids everything. It's not about, it's the charm of the children. It's not about the fact that they can't sing and dance in time or in tune. It's not about that. It's about the emotional integrity and getting the message across. So in this instance, though I'm normally a perfectionist and I'll tweak for days, in a studio, making it perfect, in this instance, going back to the rawness and of the singing was the most important thing, which I hope translated across to the audience.
With them being so out of tune, you must have got a few artifacts and stuff there, and that must have been really tricky getting it to shape up. You know, if there's 6 or 7 semitones out.
It was, yeah. Well, I mean, you'd be amazed how people who think they can't sing actually can sing when they're thrown into an environment, when they're surrounded by external guide vocals. And I mean, I'd be there in the studio with her, sort of singing with her, and encouraging her, and we'd laugh and joke and be relaxed. And children are very, very, we underestimate children and their ability to pick up things and learn very fast. She got the lyrics and heard the song for the first time the night before the session, and she picked it up very, very quickly, as did all the others.
Thank you for your talk, it was really interesting. What I wanted to ask was, how did you decide which genres to go for, depending on child? Like, why didn't you just go with, like, the last clip you showed was sort of classical, sort of Bollywood thing. Why did you decide to go with so many, like, varying genres?
Because it was a creative challenge that I wanted to cross myself. But also it had to fit the personality of the child. So from watching a few snippets of raw footage, interview footage of each child, and speaking to the director, to say, well, here's one girl, here's one 10-year-old boy who's the life and soul of the school. He's a cheeky chappy, he's always causing mischief, he's very fun and exuberant. I thought, okay, let's go for something very upbeat and poppy for him. Whereas Raj and Mayuri, they wanted to find a balance through and shape the film musically through the songs as well. So you wanted to have an uplifting song at the end with the whole school singing. We wanted to have an emotional, resonant song for the brother and sister. We wanted to have something upbeat that would fit the personalities of the children.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hello. I have a question about the Swedish film, about the serial killer. Do you have any input in the final mix of your music to the rest of the sounds?
That wasn't the final mix.
Because I found the music much too loud.
As a media composer, film, television composer, I know my place. I know that I am not wanted in the dubbing theatre normally. And also I'm so up against it with deadlines. Quite often I'm working through the pre-mixing stages anyway. So by the time it gets to the final mix, the director and the editor will normally be there, and they when a composer turns up to a dubbing theatre, they're going to be fighting their corner and saying, please turn the music up. And the sound effects guys are going to say, let's turn the explosions up. And it's not, and having experience in all those different areas, that's not my agenda. And you know, in this instance, I turned up to the final mix. On certain projects I do. On the musical I did, and so I do have valid input in terms of trying to gauge a balance between all the different elements, which, you know, are all valid and all very important to help tell that sound story.
Okay, thank you. I think that's all we have time for. I'm so sorry.
Thank you.
But thank you,
Emily.
Nainita.
Thank you. Thank you.